What's going on, everybody? So here we are yet again, and I want to talk about card grading. Now, some topics are a lot of fun to talk about, but some topics I think we need to talk about. We're at the point now where card grading is a major part of the collecting industry. We need to understand what's happening. We need to stay up to date on what is going on with all the companies. And as a mostly vintage collector, most of my focus and attention is always going to be on SGC and PSA. They're the two biggest companies, and by far the two biggest when we're talking about vintage cards. Again, I've talked about these companies before. I've compared them, I've pros and cons, and I really do think that both are very solid companies that I consider and have sent cards into each of them. A lot of people do not really like this topic. If you're a PSA person and anybody says anything that could be anti-PSA, you don't like that. And if you're an SGC person and anybody says anything anti-SGC, they don't like that. Let me just again reiterate, I don't have any skin in the game here. I am simply reporting what I see, what I read, and what my eyes tell me. I'll say right off, most of my collection is in PSA holders. I think PSA is a very good company that has some issues. SGC, I think, is a very good company that has some issues. So when I go to a card show, like I did this weekend, and I bought 4 cards in PSA slabs, and 2 of those slabs are older generation slabs, and we'll talk about what that means in this video. The question then becomes, has grading gotten harder? I've talked about this before. I think it has. Now, whether you like him or not, Jeff Wilson from Sports Card Investor is a guy that gets us access to places that we don't get to see and interviews that we don't get to participate in. Well, at last year's National, Jeff Wilson sat down and had an interview with Nat Turner, the CEO and the head of PSA. And he asked him point blank, do you think that card grading is getting harder? People are saying that. And Nat Turner came back and he said, I read about this in social media. I hear people complain about this, but no, our procedures haven't changed. Nothing has changed since I've been at the company, for a couple of years or 2.5 years or whatever. Nothing's changed. But here's the problem. Something has changed. Something significant changed at PSA, but for whatever reason, nobody wants to acknowledge it. Now, it's not just PSA who has changed their procedures since they started grading. SGC has done it as well. Jeff Wilson and Sports Card Investor recently did a tour of the SGC facility, and they were looking at technology on how they can look closely at documents for counterfeits. And one of the things that it does is it can find creases that are very difficult to see from the naked eye. And as they're going through the demonstration of this machine, I'm sitting there going, this is probably a good thing. It's probably a good thing that SGC is using technology that they now have at their disposal. Well, PSA is also using technology at their disposal now that they didn't used to have. And that technology was put into place since Nat Turner took over. So when he says nothing has changed, I don't get that. Does that mean PSA is bad? No. Does it mean SGC is bad? No. All companies need to evolve. all companies need to improve. All companies need to add technology to help them get better at what they do. If they weren't doing that, we would say, why aren't you evolving? Why aren't you improving? So of course they're going to do that. And of course I think that's a good thing. Now here's one of the biggest complaints whenever I talk about grading is people say, just because a card is in an old grade doesn't mean that the old grade is a bad grade. And I agree. Again, just this weekend, I bought 2 cards. I bought a 64 Sandy Koufax in an old holder. But to me, it holds up. To me, it's at least still a 6. So just because it's an old holder doesn't make it bad. I bought a 58 Willie Mays in an old holder. I'm not saying all old holders are bad. All I'm saying is things have changed. And by changing, the process is different. And by the process is different, we need to be aware of the fact that things have changed. And we need to participate in the process of understanding what's different so we can give a card a closer look if it's a card that we think may not hold up to the grade it was given when it was given. So we're going to look at a few cards here. We're going to compare some cards. I think some old grades are maybe not good anymore. I think some old grades are. We're going to look at both. Again, buy the card, not the grade, but let's take a look first at a handful of cards that I think prove that card grading has gotten a little bit harder.
So this is the first thing we want to really kind of talk about is, have the standards truly changed? Have they gotten harder? I think they have. And we're going to talk throughout this video, and hang in there with me. But we're going to talk about why they've changed, how they've changed. So on the left, we have 2 cards graded by PSA. On the right, we have 2 cards graded by SGC. Now, when we see these 4 cards here, first, which one do you think has the highest grade? Which one do you think has the lowest grade? We know the 2 on the right are the SGC cards because of the black tuxedo around the card. But when we look on the left, those are going to be the PSA cards. Now look at those grades. The card on the far left got a 2. Do you think that card would get a 2 today? Now that's an old grade. How do I know that's an old grade? Because the label tells me a lot of information. Again, I'm going to post down below in the comments a link to my video on how to tell the 10 generations of cards apart. The second one got a 2.5. Is that a half a point better than the card on the far left? That's a half a point jump from the far left to the second one. I mean, if you look on the far left card, you see those 2 areas I just highlighted. Those are 2 big clues. No lighthouse label, and then the number and the grade word on the same line. On the right, we have 2 SGCs. Those are both 1.5s. I mean, isn't the one on the right way better than the SGC on the left? All right, here are a couple more. Got a 56 mantle. We got 2 of these. These are both graded by PSA. Which of these cards do you think is nicer? To me, one of them is just light years better than the other one. And a lot of you are going to say, well, you're not showing the back of the card. We can't see the surface of the card. It's a 3-dimensional object, and you're just giving us a 2-dimensional picture. Well, yeah, it's impossible to show on a screen the 3-dimension of it. They got the same grade. You think that card on the top would get a 4 today? Not only would it get a 4 today, but is it the equivalent card to the card on the bottom? I mean, Look at that corner on the bottom left. That thing is trashed. Look at the corner on the bottom right. That thing is trashed. The one on the bottom has better centering, has way better corners, has a clearer white border, clearer image, but they're supposed to be the same grade. I mean, it's borderline undeniable that the grading's gotten harder.
So what do you think? I mean, looking at those cards, isn't it kind of clear that there are some cards in older holders that probably wouldn't get those same grades today? So what changed, at least at PSA? What changed at PSA? Because Nat Turner said nothing changed. The process is the same. But that's just not true. There are articles, there are press releases. There's a press release from PSA about them buying out a technology company. And in the article, in PSA's press release on PSA's website, it talks about how this is going to change their process in how they grade. It's going to make it faster and more accurate. Now, faster and more accurate sounds great to me, but he's claiming that nothing changed, but something did change. And whenever there's a change, it could affect the grades, right? So the company, let's look I'm going to show you right now a video of what that company does that PSA purchased. They even said they were going to immediately start utilizing. And let's just look at how it works. So check this out.
This is the company that PSA bought out, Genament. And this is a display from Genament's YouTube page of how the grading is done. They put the card to be scanned, and then the software does the work. You see it calculating over there to the right, the bottom right. So it just calculated this Dave Parker card's grade based on the scan of it, based on the edges and the corners. So now here's another card, and you can see it working over there. It's processing. It's coming up with a grade. Again, this is the software that PSA bought out and said they were immediately implementing.
So they slide a card into the machine. The image scans it for imperfections. The image checks it for corners and edges and creases and surface and color and all that stuff. And then it comes up with a grade. And this is now assisting the graders at PSA. Now, is this a good thing? To a certain extent, I do think it's good because it's going to make it more consistent, ideally, right? But it's different. It's different than it was. So when we say has card grading gotten harder? Yes, I think it's gotten harder. Or at least it's changed. And when there's a change, it could make it easier, it could make it harder as they're calibrating things, right? Does that mean all old grades are bad grades? It does not mean that. I am not saying that. Again, I bought 2 old grades this weekend. I wouldn't do that if I thought old grades were junk. Buy the card, not the grade. We've said it a million times. A lot of people have said it a million times. A lot of people have said it a lot of times before I said it. But it's true. Let's take a look at some cards that I think probably do hold up from both SGC and PSA, because SGC has made some changes with some of their infrared scanning, document, analysis software. And so has PSA with the program that I just showed you. So does that mean all cards that are old are bad? No. Take a look at some right now. Right? Take a look at some of these right here. I think these grades hold up.
So again, just because a card is an old grade does not mean it's a bad grade. It does not mean that. Look at these two Clemente rookie cards. You say, which one's better? Which of these two is better? Very similar centering. Color, could be the scan of how the image was created. But they're very similar cards. To me personally, my personal opinion is I think the one on the bottom is a little bit better. And it's the old SGC grade. They're both 4.5s. They have the same grade. So the SGC 4.5, that was done a while ago. And you can see I highlighted the printer mark there on the bottom of the one on the top. If it wasn't for that printer mark, I'd probably say they're about equivalent. But that printer mark, I think, makes the one on the bottom a little bit better, which is the old grade. And again, remember, SGC has implemented new software and new programs and new equipment, new technology. Let's look at this mantle. This is an older grade mantle. 59 mantle. It's a 3. That's a heck of a nice 3. Again, we're not looking at the back. I know we're not looking at the back. We're not looking at the back because I'm trying to give you a big enough image that you can see the part we care about the most. But I looked at the backs. There's nothing crazy going on the backs of any of these cards. The 55 kilobrew, I think that holds up. I think that's a solid 5 now, even though that's a very old grade. That's a 3rd generation grade. And these hold up. So what do you think? Do you think that the grading is getting tougher? But also, that doesn't necessarily mean that every old grade is a bad grade. I'm not saying that. But I am saying that new technology is being used, admittedly. They're spending millions of dollars to buy equipment and technology to help have AI help.
So that's really the question. Do you think it's gotten harder? It obviously hasn't gotten harder in every single case, but we need to be aware of it. We need to understand that things have changed. We need to understand what is now happening. So when we're making decisions on what it is we want to be submitting, what we want to buy, whether it's a new grade, an old grade. And again, I have a link down below of the video that I did a while back of the 10 different generations of holders so that you, when you're buying a card and you look at it, you can tell an idea of when the card was graded based on the holder and the flip, the tag in the holder. Check that out if you've not yet done so. Give me your feedback. What do you think about this whole thing? Did you know they were using this technology? Is this new to you? And what do you think about it? Leave those comments down below. I look forward to hearing what y'all have to say.
All right. If you've not yet taken a moment to subscribe to my channel, I really hope you'll consider doing that.